Please join me in welcoming Alee to the show. Alee, thanks for joining me.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Do you want me to go into my work background too, or
Yeah, let's jump right into it.
Awesome. So my work background is I didn't always start in FinOps. Actually, I never wanted to get into cloud. If you would have asked me, John, sitting in this chair probably 4 years ago, if I'd ever be working in cloud, I would have said, heck no. I do not want to go into that space at all. My husband and me actually worked for the same company, and he was in their cloud practice. So we're a great match, but I don't think we do well working together. And so I basically put up my guard and said, cloud is the one space I do not want to get into. But of course, life has other plans. And the one piece of advice I have from everyone is never say no to anything. Keep an open mind, because if I wouldn't have kept an open mind and taken the opportunity I had, I would not be in cloud today, and I don't know where my path would have been. So keep an open mind. But from there, I was able to get my start in cloud. Before joining my now current company, my title was commercial architect, and people thought that meant I architected either commercials or buildings.
Oh, I like that you touched on the hub and spoke model. You typically, I like to ask, are you like a centralized, a decentralized, a hub and spoke? And the overlap between you and your counterpart allow you guys to collaborate and kind of reach out and broaden your skill sets.
Yes, definitely. I will say the one thing about our organization is our organization essentially has multiple different types of businesses running within it. A full centralized model just wouldn't be successful here, and a decentralized model would create a lot of rework. So we have a lot of great counterpart teams in our different business segments that we are able to work at more of that hub and spoke model, because they all have different needs, different levels of maturity, but also different priorities. So how can we meet them where they're at and meet their teams where they're at, so that they can also hit their priorities, but we're not having a bunch of duplicate processes. And I think the trend that we see in FY24 coming is, how do we remove duplicate processes and duplicate costs wherever possible? I think a topic that I've heard about on your podcast, in fact, you'll bring in AI. I think AI is an area that no customer can say that they're in the run stage of. I think most of us are in the crawl stage because it's so new. So there's so many different areas that are evolving that Walk allows us to take advantage of them. We just might walk faster in certain areas.
All that stuff that has to be manually done, if you can tackle at least 80% using automation, where the other 20% is a manual effort, you're going to achieve so much more.
Yep. And I think the hardest part for me right now is trying to balance, do we automate tasks that me and my team are doing, or should we focus on automating tasks that our customers are doing? And for right now, we've been focusing a lot of the tasks that our customers are doing, because if we're able to free up their time, they're able to run more efficiently, action more optimizations, and hit the business priorities that they have. So although we do invest in a lot of our optimization, I try to focus on how do we help our customers automate and help them be able to free up their time, because every optimization takes effort. So the more time they have to focus on architecting for optimization, the larger of the success our organization can have. If you don't have trust in the data or traceability into the data, and customers don't understand and you're bringing them on the journey, you will lose them, because the data is the foundation of optimization, understanding your cost, understanding your business value, and what your total cost of ownership and impact on the business you can have is. And so taking a step back and saying, let's rework our data based on what we know now. How do we make it more transparent, more scalable? So as cloud providers mature in what they provide us, we're able to take advantage of that too. So we re-architected a lot of our data processes and pipelines and how we structure the data.
Speaking of like your mature FinOps teams, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you might see immature FinOps teams make or implementations?
Say the biggest mistake is not doing standardization from the get-go. If I started from scratch and it was a brand new cloud practice, brand new space there, I think starting with standards, but making sure your standards are also adaptable. Because I think some of the biggest issues that we see with a lot of new FinOps organizations is they get very set in their ways, or they're very rooted towards a certain process. I think the biggest advice is you're just your first wrong answer.
When you're talking about standardization, are you talking about like standardization of reporting, standardization of tackling some of the challenges and the issues that come up, the cost, the motivation of teams? Is it everything?
I'd say standardization of your organization's practices. If I could go back in time and create standards for tagging, I think the standards need to be adaptable, but now you have better visibility into your costs. And maybe your tagging standard is an account standard instead, but it's just what works for your organization. I'd also like to create standards on how we manage data, and also how we have to get data from our vendors, and be able to push back on our vendors from the beginning, because beyond cloud, there's a lot of other costs associated with it that you need to manage to run efficiently. And not all vendors provide data in a very transparent way. So being able to set standards of, here's the different ways that we will ingest data, it needs to hit one of these standards. So we could have our standards for data ingestion set up. I also think standards for how you decide where to run and what you run. I think that is one of the biggest areas that if you could have better visibility or better safeguards in place so teams can run efficiently from the start. In a FinOps practice, it's a lot easier to start with optimization than it is to bring it in later. So how do you embed optimization in your culture from the get-go? And what are your standards for optimization? And I think standards for optimization at a large organization are really hard to say. So for my team, I can't say with certainty our full standards of optimization, because they vary so much team to team. Whereas if I was just starting out, that would be probably the first thing I define is, what does optimization, what does FinOps, what does financial engineering mean to us? And here are tenets that we live by and grow on.
Well, why are you doing that? Because this has changed, and it allows you to reevaluate and put you maybe back to a crawl in certain areas so you can move forward and be more efficient.
I completely agree with that. We're actually having a workshop here. We're bringing together a few of our different teams that are associated in some of our processes, because we actually had a team question and say, hey, why are we doing this today? And the answer was, this is just what we've always done. And that's not a good answer.
The hardest. I'm sorry. Every time somebody says that, I always think of a friend who says we're doing it this way because we've always done it this way.
Yep, exactly. And so I think everyone on this podcast, look at some processes that you're doing and say, does it actually have to happen that way? Or have you just been doing it so long that way that you're comfortable?
Alee, you had the chance to present at FinOpsX back in June. What was the topic?
The topic was, is it a savings or a spend reduction?
Well, is it?
I think this is one where if you would have asked me about a year ago, I don't think I would have even thought about this. And this is where, if you look at the economic landscape going on just in this past year, there's been some different shifts. And one of our organization's priorities was, we need to save. We need to cut costs, not just in cloud, but everywhere. And we had some savings targets. Well, the problem that we were facing was, we would call out optimizations as savings. And it was really losing trust with our finance teams. Our finance teams actually sat me down and said, hey, look, I'm confused here. Can you explain to me what a savings is? And that's kind of where this all started. My manager actually was the one who came up with the title of the topic, because she and me, because we were just both getting so bombarded with what is a savings.
Alee, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about the co-created dashboard, the Cloud Intelligent Dashboard, actually CUDOS, which I love the name, that you did with AWS. What is CUDOS?
Okay, so CUDOS in the Cloud Intelligence Dashboard started off as a way for me to scale what I was doing with my customers. So the very first one of the Cloud Intelligence Dashboards was in the CUDOS dashboards was the Cost Intelligence Dashboard. And this all started because I was working with over 20 different customers, and I found myself repeating the same process multiple times. And as we know, with customers of complex nature, a lot of the native tooling doesn't meet their needs. So instead of having to rework everything I was doing or explain the same concept over and over, what it actually started is how can I get teams to think about data in a more scalable way?
A workload should be run where it best fits. That's a really good quote.
Thank you. It's something that it's sometimes hard because you're comfortable running where you are. But I think there's going to be a lot more hybrid type workloads coming into space. And a lot more areas where vendors who have the niche market in an area, you might run that piece, that workload there, or that whole workload might run on that vendor because of the one area that sets them apart. It's not always the one you're comfortable running on, but if you're not comfortable running on it, how do we make sure that our teams have the tools so that they can educate themselves to run where they need to run?